Ryland stumbled over the edge of the cargo crate and landed on his face, nutrient gel squelching across the floor of the Aegis Vanguard. Perfect landing, he muttered to himself, sitting up and wiping a smear of glowing green goo off his cheek. He glanced up at the towering figure in front of him, Calith. She stood with the calm, measured precision of a predator in zero gravity, one long ear twitching as if mocking him, though her expression remained unreadable. "You might want to watch your step," she said, voice low but carrying that unmistakable edge of authority. Her other hand rested casually on the hilt of her plasma blade, the one everyone joked could cut through reinforced bulkheads like butter. Ryland coughed on the gel fumes and waved a hand apologetically. "Yeah, I was testing gravity. Very scientific." Calith tilted her head, eyes narrowing just enough to make Ryland's stomach do somersaults. "Gravity works fine without testing," she said, and Ryland could swear he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Just a twitch, but it might have been a smile. He tried to stand, lost his balance, and somehow ended up spinning slowly in the artificial gravity field, arms flailing. Calith reached out with lightning speed, her long fingers curling around his forearm and yanking him back towards solid ground. He landed on his knees, wheezing. "Thanks," he gasped, trying to sound dignified while looking like a gelatinous blob of spilled experiment. "Watch your step," she said again, as if this were a repeat of some cosmic joke she'd endured 1,000 times. Ryland straightened, dusted himself off, and decided a direct approach was necessary. "So, you're Calith, right?" His voice wavered. The Calith, the warrior everyone talks about in glowing, terrifying whispers. He tried to grin. It didn't work. He looked like a gelatinous blob trying to grin. Calith's long ears shifted slightly, like antennas tuned to some frequency only she could hear. "I am that Calith," she said calmly. "And you are?" "Rylan," he said. "Navigator, aspiring chaos coordinator, occasional hero of minor inconvenience." He gave a mock salute. Calith's eyes narrowed again. He decided not to press his luck. The intercom beeped, cutting through the tension like a saw blade. "All personnel, battle simulation commencing in T-3 minutes. Prepare for tactical evaluation." Ryland's heart skipped. "Battle simulation? Oh sure, no pressure at all," he muttered. Calith's gaze flicked to him. "You'll need to keep up," she said, turning on her heel and striding toward the training deck. The sound of her boots clicking against the metal floor echoed in the corridor like a measured heartbeat. He tried to follow, stumbled over his own feet, and nearly collided with a maintenance drone that hovered by the wall. Sorry, mister." "Drone," he said. The drone beeped indignantly. "He's usually a lot more polite," Calith commented, appearing beside him like a shadow in motion. "Usually," Ryland stammered. The training deck was already lit with holographic projections of star systems, enemy ships, and orbital debris. Ryland's chest tightened. He wasn't supposed to be nervous. He'd done simulations before, but Calith moving among the holograms with effortless precision made his own clumsy attempts feel like slapstick theater. "Rylan, your target acquisition is off by 12%, Calith said, not looking at him. He squinted at the holo display, which now seemed to be mocking him with its floating numbers. 12%. That's basically accurate in a chaotic sense." He jabbed at the console, accidentally sending his own holographic fighter careening into a virtual asteroid. "Oops." Calith's long ears twitched again. "Chaos is not strategy," she said, and then, Ryland could not believe it, she added almost sotto voce, "but amusing." He froze. Amusing, did she just... He looked at her, eyes wide. Calith's face was as unreadable as a sealed data module, but there was that slight shift in her expression. She didn't smile, not really, but something teasing lingered. "Focus," she said, voice clipped but sharper now. "Or you'll destroy the simulation, and possibly your career." Ryland swallowed. Career, yes, important. He adjusted the controls and tried to aim his holographic blaster at the incoming enemy ships. One of them careened off course into a holographic moon, which exploded in a dazzling display. Caliph moved past him, slicing through enemy projections with a grace that made Ryland feel like a toddler trying to wield a plasma sword in a pottery shop. As the simulation reached its chaotic peak, alarms flashed red and the floor hummed with low-frequency vibrations. Ryland flailed, Caliph moved, and somewhere in the chaos, he realized he was laughing, part fear, part relief, part awe. How does she make this look so easy? He muttered. Caliph glanced at him briefly, one eyebrow raised, and quipped dryly, "Years of practice, and luck." Ryland blinked. "Luck, huh? Then I'm basically a legend." He spun around, accidentally bumping a console. Sparks flew, and a small fire ignited in the corner. Caliph's hand shot out, extinguishing it with a precise gesture, her long ears flicking like twin blades. "Legend of disaster," she corrected, and this time the corner of her mouth twitched more noticeably. The simulation ended in a blaze of hollow lasers and explosions, with Ryland somehow surviving mostly intact. Caliph looked at him, crossed arms, one eyebrow arched, and said, "You may not be dead, for now." "Victory," Ryland declared, chest puffed with pride. "And surviving is basically winning, right?" Caliph shook her head. "Barely. But amusing nonetheless." Ryland grinned, heart-pounding. There was something about this alien warrior, human-like, long ears, unflinchingly capable, that made the chaos of the Aegis Vanguard feel less lonely and far more dangerous in the most thrilling way. And he had a sinking suspicion he was going to survive a lot of this, mostly by laughing through it. Ryland's first attempt at breakfast in the mess hall was a disaster of cosmic proportions. He had grabbed what he thought was a protein cube, but it turned out to be a concentrated alien caffeine capsule. His tongue caught fire, his eyes watered, and he launched a salute that sent a stack of ration trays clattering into the floor. Caliph, already seated at the far end of the hall, didn't flinch. Her long ears twitched once, like a radar scanning for chaos, then she took a measured sip from her nutrient tube, utterly unbothered. "You seem to have a talent for destruction before 700 hours, she said, voice low, but the way she said it made Ryland wonder if she was teasing, or just cataloging him for future reference. Yes. It's a gift," Ryland said, waving his scorched cube like it was a flag of victory. "Superpower, mild domestic sabotage." Caliph's eyebrow arched in the way that made him feel simultaneously admired and utterly ridiculous. Superpower. Right. He perched on the edge of the bench, the cube crumbling in his hands. "So, how long have you been a warrior?" he asked, trying to change the subject before she catalogued him as a disaster permanently. "Long enough," she said, voice crisp, and then added, almost impossibly dry, "to know which corners of the galaxy are worth falling into and which are worth avoiding entirely." Ryland snorted. "Avoiding corners, got it. Essential life skill. Check." He glanced at the ship's viewport and saw the spinning debris of a nearby asteroid belt. "Speaking of corners, or asteroids, or floating death traps, ever had a space pirate attempt to roast you over a plasma grill?" Caliph blinked once. "Plasma grill. Well, metaphorically, or maybe literally. Could happen." Ryland grinned, hoping she'd bite. She didn't, but she did lean slightly forward, one long ear brushing against the table edge, like she was calculating whether the probability of him exploding into tiny bits was worth her attention. The day's training schedule loomed. Tactical simulations, zero-gravity drills, and a friendly combat exercise where Ryland was the designated target. He had survived previous simulations by sheer luck and creative chaos, but today Caliph was involved, and Ryland's survival odds dropped from 37% to slightly above negative infinity. The simulation chamber was a kaleidoscope of lights, floating holograms, and the low hum of the artificial gravity field. Ryland attempted to slip past an incoming drone squadron, only to trip over a floating power conduit and spin wildly into a wall panel. Sparks erupted, illuminating Caliph's figure like a goddess of precision and mischief. She moved past him, long limbs and long ears flowing, cutting down virtual drones with a finesse that made him question his own DNA. "You're, impressively fast," Rylan gasped, dangling from the wall with one hand while frantically stabbing at controls with the other. "Fast enough to keep you alive," Calith said, almost conversationally. "Barely." One hollow drone looped past him and exploded harmlessly, leaving him with a cloud of glittering particles that settled on his hair. "Decorative explosions. I call them celebratory sparks," he declared, flailing. Calith's long ears twitched. "You are both a hazard and mildly amusing," she said, and Rylan nearly fell off the wall trying to take that as a compliment. The exercise ended in a spectacular mess. Drones disabled, consoles smoking, and Rylan somehow still upright though teetering. Calith regarded him with an inscrutable gaze. "You survive barely." "Survival, that's half the battle," Rylan said, chest puffed. "Besides, my style is chaos-based victory, very avant-garde." Later, in the ship's observation deck, Rylan tried to regain some dignity. He stared out at the nebulae, swirling colors casting eerie lights over the deck. Calith entered silently, her long ears catching the soft hum of the ship's engines. "You seem to enjoy endangering yourself," she said, voice calm. "I enjoy living dangerously," he said, which was only partially true. Mostly, he just enjoyed surviving by sheer luck and hoping no one documented it for interstellar ridicule. Calith leaned on the railing, watching him. "You have a peculiar way of staying alive. It's interesting, annoying, and strangely effective." Rylan blinked. "Strangely effective, that's flattering, I think." She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward the nebula outside. "You see that cluster? Pirates once tried to navigate through there blindfolded. Ended poorly. You would have been vaporized within seconds." Rylan waved his hands dramatically. "And yet I survive. Clearly, the universe enjoys me more than it should. It's a cosmic joke. You should take notes." Calith's long ears twitched again, and for a brief second, Rylan thought he saw the faintest curve of amusement on her lips. Then she straightened, stiffening with that air of warrior focus he both feared and admired. Hours later, in the cargo hold, they attempted a joint exercise, maneuvering an anti-grav crate through a maze of laser grids. Rylan's approach was all wild swings and improbable leaps, while Calith's was precise, fluid, almost painfully efficient. At one point, Rylan somehow managed to knock both of them into a pile of crates, sending them rolling across the floor in a tangle of limbs and laughter. "You have a gift for disaster," Calith said, brushing herself off. "And you have a gift for surviving disasters." Rylan replied, wobbling to his feet. Calith regarded him quietly for a long moment, long ears flicking like delicate sensors. Then, almost without warning, she said, "Perhaps you are more interesting than I first assumed." Rylan grinned, wobbling again as the anti-grav crates floated around like confused kittens. "Interesting, that's my middle name." "Well, metaphorically. Actually, my middle name is Harold, but that's less heroic." Calith didn't laugh. Not really. But the twitch at the corner of her lips was almost imperceptible, a small crack in the armor of an untouchable warrior. By the time the day ended, Rylan was covered in scrapes, bruises, and sparks, yet he felt alive in a way the hum of the ship's engines had never made him feel before. Calith walked beside him silently, long ears brushing against the railings, and he dared a joke. "You know, if surviving this ship were an Olympic sport, I'd probably get a participation medal, and you get a solid gold, engraved with my face." Calith tilted her head. "If your face were engraved, it might scare the galaxy more than the pirates." Rylan laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." She said nothing, but her long ears twitched in what might have been approval. And in that subtle gesture, Rylan realized that chaos and humor could survive alongside duty and precision. And maybe, just maybe, so could he. Rylan's first attempt to pilot the dropship to the mining colony was disastrous. Not slightly off course disastrous, but turning left sends us spiraling into a nebula, and right might launch us into the Federation's orbital command. Kind of disastrous. Caliph sat rigidly beside him, long ears twitching like twin sensors, arms crossed, and a single eyebrow arched in that impossible way that made Rylan feel both small and ridiculously exposed. "Rylan," she said, voice calm but precise, "the throttle does not respond to screaming." That's new information," he said, gripping the control yoke as the dropship yawed dangerously. Sparks flickered across the console as he jabbed buttons at random. "Doesn't it? I thought it might appreciate motivational encouragement." Caliph didn't answer. Instead, she leaned over, her movements smooth, almost like water flowing in zero gravity, and adjusted his grip. "Hold here," she instructed, pressing 3 buttons simultaneously, flipping a switch he hadn't noticed and nudging the throttle. The ship stabilized, hovering with the precision of a knife edge. Rylan blinked. You just saved our lives. And possibly the colony, and maybe a few minor civilizations nearby. No big deal." Caliph's long ears flicked. "Minor civilizations are irrelevant to you." They might be. Depends on snack availability," he replied, scanning the console. One small panel lit up and his stomach lurched. "Oh no, oxygen reserves are dropping." "You have oxygen reserves?" she asked dryly. Rylan waved a hand vaguely. "Theoretically, probably, maybe, I think." She leaned back, one hand brushing against the smooth edge of the console, and sighed. "Chaos-based navigation strikes again." The dropship's automated defense turrets activated as they approached the colony, scanning for rogue drones and pirate vessels. Rylan fumbled with the targeting console. They look hostile, definitely hostile, maybe slightly grumpy." Caliph swiveled her head, long ears brushing his shoulder. "Yes, hostile, attack imminent, try not to vaporize us." Rylan's attempt at evasive maneuvers looked like a drunk octopus piloting a paper airplane. Caliph, unmoved, stood, her long ears twitching, and moved with lethal elegance. Within seconds, she had disabled the first wave of drones, her plasma blades flashing in the dim light, cutting precisely through mechanical joints. "Wow, that was impressive," Rylan said, leaning against the console for balance. "Do you take requests, maybe for me next time?" Caliph didn't reply. She was already intercepting another wave, spinning in zero gravity with the grace of a dancer and the lethality of a warship. Rylan ducked behind a panel, muttering, "Dancing, lethal dancing. Yes, I get it." They finally landed at the colony amidst smoke and floating debris. The AI systems were failing, lights flickering, and miners huddled in corners, clutching plasma cutters like tiny shields. Rylan stepped out first, tripping over a pipe and tumbling into a pile of ore. "All clear," he yelled anyway. Caliph's eyes flicked to him, long ears twitching. "You've only created chaos, nothing else is clear." During the firefight with remaining security drones, Rylan tried to contribute. He waved his laser sidearm wildly, managed to knock over a crate that landed on 3 drones at once, causing sparks and short circuits. Caliph moved beside him silently, her long ears brushing the air as she disarmed the last of the active drones. "Your methods are unconventional," she said. "I prefer creative," Rylan replied. "It's all about interpretation." In the aftermath, the colony supervisor, a small, nervous human with more fingers than usual, approached them. You two survived." "Yes," Caliph said simply, brushing dust off her armor. "Barely." Rylan jumped in. "I survived gloriously. Also, I may have accidentally rearranged some power lines." "You're welcome." The supervisor's eyes widened. "Power lines?" Caliph didn't answer. She scanned the colony, long ears rotating slightly, as if reading some invisible grid of danger. "Rylan," she said finally, voice calm, "do not touch anything else." "Touching things is my superpower," he said. "I touch, I destroy, I occasionally save lives. It's all part of the chaos narrative." Later, as they floated above the colony in a maintenance lift, Caliph studied the damage patterns and Rylan's antics. She didn't speak for a long time. Rylan broke the silence. You know, you could crack a joke, even just a tiny one. Maybe about my flying skills. Her lips twitched imperceptibly. Flying skills are hazardous to all life forms, she said. Rylan grinned. See, that counts. Humor, victory. In a quiet corner, he noticed something in the reflection of her chest plate. A faint shimmer, like a sigil glowing subtly beneath the surface. He squinted. Hey, Caliph, is that? She glanced at him, long ears twitching defensively. That is nothing, she said, voice clipped. Nothing that glows like a tiny neon warning, Rylan asked. Because it kinda looks personal. Caliph ignored him, adjusting her stance. Rylan, undeterred, whispered to himself. If it's personal, it's probably important, and definitely dangerous to me. By the time they returned to the Aegis Vanguard, Rylan was exhausted, exhilarated, and more intrigued than ever. Caliph, silent and precise, removed her armor and cleaned her plasma blades. He caught a glimpse of her long ears against the dim lighting and wondered what secrets she carried beneath that warrior exterior. Tomorrow, she said finally, glancing at him, we go to the asteroid field for tactical drills. Try not to die. I'll try, he said cheerfully. No promises about style, though. Caliph's eyes flicked toward him. One long ear twitched, a small, subtle motion. But it was enough for Rylan to feel like he'd earned the faintest approval of the untouchable warrior beside him. And somewhere, floating in zero gravity above a war-torn mining colony, he realized that surviving alongside her was more dangerous, more thrilling, and somehow far more amusing than any simulation he'd ever faced. Rylan was late. Again. He'd miscalculated the time dilation effect near the plasma turbines, and somehow ended up showing to the medbay corridor 20 minutes after Caliph had already started the zero-gravity training drills. He skidded across the polished metal floor, arms flailing like a broken humanoid drone, and crashed into the wall with a loud thunk. Caliph turned, one eyebrow arched, long ears flicking like twin radar dishes. You're late, she said, calm, precise, deadly. Yet there was something in the twitch of her lip that made Rylan suspect amusement. Yes, I recalibrated my temporal alignment, he said, grinning, though he felt like a malfunctioning bot. Science experiment gone slightly sideways. Caliph's eyes narrowed. You mean you overslept? I prefer temporally challenged, Rylan replied, much more dignified. The training chamber was alive with drones, holographic targets, and floating debris in zero gravity. Rylan floated awkwardly, hitting a panel and spinning into a wall again. Caliph moved past him, limbs flew. Caliph rolled her eyes, if that was possible for someone so precise, and intercepted a rogue drone mid-flight. Sparks flew as her plasma blade cut it apart. Your chaos is amusing, she said. Rylan grinned. Amusing, see. Still surviving. Then the emergency lights flashed red. The simulated asteroid belt had become unexpectedly real. Debris floated in from the maintenance bay, and the system had glitched, sending actual high-velocity shards into their path. Rylan panicked, spinning in a frantic arc, while Caliph moved like liquid metal, intercepting debris with calm precision. One shard clipped his suit, sending a small burn across the chest plate. He flailed. I'm fine, totally fine. Caliph stopped, hovering before him, long ears twitching, plasma blade in hand. Her gaze flicked downward and Rylan froze. For the first time, she didn't look at him with casual judgment or amusement. She looked deliberate, focused. And something about the way her chest shifted under the armor caught his attention. The light reflected off a faint engraving over her heart. At first, he thought it was a mark from the drills, a battle scar. But no. The letters glowed faintly, delicate alien script curling intricately. Rylan's breath caught. He leaned forward, squinting. Is that my name? Caliph's eyes met his, long ears twitching like sensitive instruments. You noticed, she said quietly, almost too quiet for the alarms and chaos surrounding them. Rylan's voice cracked. That's impossible. Why? It is neither a warning nor a message, she said, voice calm, precise. It is a promise. Something personal. Rylan blinked, trying to process. Personal? You mean like a cosmic Valentine? Calith's lips twitched slightly. Not Valentine, bond, recognition, loyalty. He stared at her chest, his mind spinning faster than the zero-gravity debris. So, wait, you've been carrying me like this all along. Yes, she said simply, long ears quivering as if attuned to the gravity of the revelation. All along. Rylan tried to process this while simultaneously dodging a floating shard. You have my name carved over your heart, and you survived every disaster I've caused intentionally. Accidents included, she said, voice clipped, but her eyes softened just a fraction. You are extraordinary in your chaos. Ryland's usual humor surged. Extraordinary, that's right, legendary. Also, mildly hazardous to myself, and possibly the universe. Calith's long ears twitched again, a subtle motion that might have been a smirk. Hazardous, indeed. He floated closer, heart racing in ways zero gravity had nothing to do with. So you're not just a warrior, you carried me, secretly. Yes, she said, precise as a laser. Silently, faithfully, intentionally. Rylan grinned despite himself, dodging a stray holographic asteroid. Faithful chaos, I like that. Sounds like a galactic buddy comedy. Calith didn't laugh, not fully, but the corner of her lips quivered faintly. He took it as a victory. Victory, he declared, floating in the midst of debris. Recognition, bonds, possibly minor romantic subtext. Calith's long ears twitched in a way that could only be interpreted as approval, or the closest thing to it she would ever allow. Do not overcomplicate survival, she said, but her eyes held a depth he'd never seen before. Rylan swallowed. Overcomplicate, never. Chaos is my specialty, but wow. The simulation ended in a burst of light and sparks. Rylan floated in the middle of the chamber, heart pounding, staring at Calith. She hovered silently, her chest armor gleaming, the glow of his name still faintly visible beneath. Rylan, she said finally, voice calm. You now understand the weight of loyalty, yes. Yes, he said. Wait, yes, heart-carved promises, yes. Also, please don't leave me floating in zero gravity, thanks. Calith's lips twitched, long ears flicking in the low light. Not leaving for now. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos, flickering lights and floating debris, Rylan realized the untouchable warrior beside him was far more than he had ever imagined. Far more dangerous, far more precise, and far more astonishingly devoted than he could have ever expected. The alarm klaxon screamed across the Aegis Vanguard, sending Rylan sprawling across the bridge floor as the ship lurched violently. I swear I was just resting my eyes. He yelled, gripping the console for balance. Sparks flew from a damaged panel. Calith, long ears flicking with every vibration, moved with the calm precision of a predator, stabilizing the emergency controls with a few sharp motions. Rylan, she said, voice clipped but steady, the fleet is under attack. We do not have time for theatrics. I call it hero preparation. He replied, trying to find a lever to pull without detonating anything. Calith didn't respond, only nudged him aside with the slightest touch, long ears brushing against his shoulder, and activated the defensive grid. Lasers arced across the viewport as enemy drones swarmed the fleet, their metallic bodies glinting against distant stars. Rylan scrambled to his console, firing off emergency commands. Shields up, maybe, possibly. Calith's eyes scanned the attack patterns. Shields are active. You will focus on navigation and tactical diversions. Navigation, tactical. Roger that. I'm a multitasking disaster machine. The first wave of enemy drones broke through the outer perimeter. Rylan's console lit up with warning signs, each more urgent than the last. Calith moved through the bridge like water over stones, disabling intruding drones with her plasma blades, slicing through metal with effortless precision. Her long ears twitched in rhythm with her movements, almost like antennae tuned to the chaos. A warning beeped, the flagship's weapons were offline. We can't fire, Rylan shouted. You will distract the drones long enough for me to restart the system, Kalith ordered. No improvisation, precision. Rylan grinned. Improvisation is my specialty. He yanked a lever that wasn't meant to be yanked and sent a small squad of drones careening into each other. Sparks and explosions lit the bridge, and Kalith shot him a look that could freeze the core of a starship. Amusing and effective, she muttered, long ears twitching, plasma blades slicing another drone in midair. As the battle raged, the enemy deployed a swarm of micro-drones that slipped past shields. Ryland's fingers flew across the console, launching emergency countermeasures that barely worked. One drone clipped his shoulder. Oh, friendly fire. Wait, not friendly. Kalith grabbed him, spinning him to safety, long ears brushing against the edge of the console. Stop panicking, she said, voice calm, and then almost casually, we are not going to die today. Casual confidence, my favorite. Ryland said, floating in zero gravity, hair sticking in all directions. The AI grid hummed to life, restoring the ship's main weapons. Kalith moved with lethal grace, taking the fight to the enemy drones outside, slicing through them with precise, sweeping motions. Target the central core, she commanded. I'll cover your flank. Ryland swallowed hard. Target the core, got it. Hopefully I don't explode anything important. He aimed the weapons with trembling hands, firing carefully. One shot struck the enemy flagship, detonating the propulsion system. The enemy ship spun out of control, colliding with a debris field in a spectacular fireball. You survived, Kalith said, long ears twitching, plasma blade retracting with a satisfying hum. I survived, barely, also heroically. Rylan asked, floating in zero gravity, hair singed from the plasma discharge. Kalith didn't respond, only touched the console, verifying systems. Then she turned, looking directly at him. Her eyes softened slightly, long ears flicking as if measuring something more than chaos and skill. You have changed, she said. Rylan blinked. I have. From disaster-prone navigational hazard to moderately competent hero. Yes, Kalith said simply. You faced danger, you acted with courage, you survived while others would not, and you kept humor. Rylan grinned. Humor. It's my survival technique, really. Highly underrated, mostly lethal to self-esteem. Kalith allowed a faint twitch of the lips, almost imperceptible. Your chaos has merit, she said, and it is valued. He floated closer, heart pounding. Valued, recognition. Finally, someone admits my heroic flair. Her long ears flicked, brushing against the edge of his suit. Not flair, necessity, you adapt, you endure, you live, and in that you carry hope for others. Rylan laughed softly, hope me. Floating disaster that somehow didn't vaporize the fleet. Yes, she said, stepping closer, gaze steady. You are more than the sum of mistakes and miscalculations. The battle ended. The fleet stabilized, the enemy retreating. Rylan, exhausted, unsteady in zero gravity, looked at Kalith. So that was kind of epic, right? Kalith's long ears twitched slightly. Epic is subjective. Epic, I call it epic, Rylan said. Also hilarious, occasionally terrifying, definitely life-altering. Kalith finally allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Life-altering, yes, she said. For you as well as others. Floating beside her, Rylan realized the truth. The chaos, the humor, the near-death spirals, all of it had led to something more than survival. It had led to connection, trust, recognition. And now, seeing the faint glow of his name over her heart, he understood that loyalty and devotion could exist in ways the galaxy rarely allowed. You know, he said quietly, I always thought surviving was the point. But surviving alongside you makes it kind of magical. Kalith's long ears flicked, and for a heartbeat she softened in a way Rylan hadn't thought possible. Perhaps, she said, chaos and precision can coexist. Rylan floated closer carefully because chaos had its limits. Coexist, excellent, then maybe we can survive more together. Her gaze met his, unwavering, long ears twitching in silent affirmation. Yes, together. And in that calm moment, amidst the wreckage of battle, the sparks of surviving chaos, and the glow of promises etched in steel and heart, Rylan understood that he had changed. He was no longer just a bumbling navigator. He was someone who could endure, who could laugh in the face of danger, and who could carry hope even in zero gravity. "Then," he said, grinning, "let's go find the next adventure. Preferably one where I don't nearly explode the ship before breakfast." Calith's lips twitched. "We will survive," she said, "and perhaps even enjoy it." Rylan laughed. "Enjoyment, my favorite part of heroism." Her long ears flicked once, in rhythm with his laughter. And for the first time, chaos and order, humor and precision, human and alien, seemed perfectly aligned among the stars.